Hello, viewers. The True Citizen comes again with a little snippet on Ukraine, which is a hot topic today, and it's been going on for a month now. And I thought it's appropriate to share views, at least my views, on what we feel about the Ukraine and Russian war.
Зробились ми великої години з пожеж війни і полум'я вогнів, плекав нас біль за долю України, зростив нас гнів і лють на ворогів, плекав нас біль за долю України, зростив нас гнів і лють.
For your information, Ukraine is the second largest country of Europe after Russia. Would you believe the area that Ukraine occupies is about 603,000 square kilometers? That's more than 500,000 square kilometers, which is quite large actually. And the capital is Kyiv, as we know, pronounced as, it's spelled rather Kyiv, which is Kyiv. And with 43 million residents, it's reasonably a well-populated country as well. What's interesting here to note is that 78% of the residents of Ukraine are Christians and 22% are Russians. They have 22% Russians, which makes Ukraine a bit of a country with a discomfort, knowing that the elegance of the Russian population is towards Russia. The coat of arms of Ukraine resembles a trishul. Yes, kind of trishul, not exactly the same, but considering it's got three sides to it, poking sides, I think looks like a trishul. Very interesting to note this. Have a look at the photo on the screen here. Ukraine always had a problem with Russia since inception, going back even to the year 1100, maybe from the time of Crusades. They had wars and they kept on fighting and going right down to Ukraine. Below Ukraine there is Crimea and they have two territories next to it, and they were all part of Russia at a point of time, let me tell you. It was really part of the Russian dominion, or rather, I should say the Russian Federation, as it used to be known, Post-World War, Russia had a lot of territory. They had the northern part of Germany, which was known as DDR, also known as East Germany. When they took over from Hitler, then they had Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, going down, of course, Ukraine was somewhat with them since then. And all those little Baltic states like Latvia, Slovenia. Oh, there are so many. Even we lose count of them. These teeny weeny states, who were always with Russia. In other words, the Russian Federation was quite big at that time, as it used to be known, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, meaning under the communist rule of Russia. That's how Russia was all along. And it was huge. And Western Europe had to be content with a few countries on the freer side, so-called the democratic side, like West Germany, UK, France, Portugal, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, of course, which was originally with Russia, gradually went on the independent path, you see. So, and going down, we have also Italy over there. So this was the Western world, but gradually, as you notice, the Russians had to give away all the Baltic states, and post-war, there were rebellions everywhere. The East Germans fought for the wall of theirs, and when the fall of the Berlin Wall took place, and Western Europe became huge. They got a lot of territory. This was the whole thing that was happening towards democracy, and that these countries felt more European rather than Russian, felt more democratic rather than communist. And that was the reason they wanted to be with the West. When I say West, we can include America for the same thought process. Okay? Now look at it. The Russians became smaller and smaller. And they had something called the Warsaw Pact, which was for the communist nations, the Eastern Bloc, as they call them. And one by one it crumbled and finally the Warsaw Pact got shut. There's no country left to join Russia. So Russia had to fend for itself as of today. They have nobody as a pact. But Western Europe has NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. My God, they are so huge. 30 plus nations together, warring people, saying they have the best of arms, primarily aimed all these countries together only at Russia. Poor Russia. Nobody with them, but 30 to 35 nations getting together against Russia. I mean, in the post-Cold War era, it didn't make sense anymore that anybody would go and fight. Russians didn't invade anyone for the last so many years. They didn't go and fight or take over territories or anything, but NATO kept threatening Russia. Oh, we are the NATO. If you do something, we'll hit you, we'll beat the hell out of you. That's what NATO kept saying. And finally, to add fuel to the fire, they yet wanted to add one more country like Ukraine. Well, how would you feel being surrounded by all these belligerent nations who want only their way and being supported by America from the rear side? Russia would definitely feel insecure. That's all Putin asked for. He said, look, you already have surrounded us right up to Finland, and now you want Ukraine as well. What's your plan? Do you want to finish us or something? Come on, I never said anything when you took all the other countries, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, everybody into NATO. But now, please, don't do any more. Enough. We don't want further surrounding. Russia did take Crimea by force, but they had no choice to consolidate themselves. If and only if, I come again to this later, this point, that all NATO had to do was to say, okay, fair enough, Russia, I think we got enough countries, we don't need to threaten you any further, no need for Ukraine to join NATO, it's all right. If they wish to join EU, that's another matter. Now I come to the next point. In 1962, America had the missile crisis. John F. Kennedy was the American president at that time, and Russia had placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. And Americans got to know about it, although it was done very discreetly, yet Americans came to know that what they were doing. It was the most testing time for an American president at that time, just as probably what Biden is facing today. But look at John F. Kennedy, what he did. He made a blockade on Cuba, and he threatened the then president of Russia, Khrushchev. And he told him that not a single missile can come and sit in Cuba any further. In fact, take away your existing missiles because they are a threat to America. They are right at our doorsteps. We don't accept it. And Kennedy won the matter. Russia decided that yes, maybe it's inappropriate, and they took away their missiles and went back. Tell me, viewers, is Russia not feeling the same way today? Why can't America see that what they themselves didn't like? Why are they imposing the same problem on Russia? Be fair, America. Don't look at your vested interests always. Try to be genuine and human, America. Don't fool the world by calling you yourselves democracy, freedom and all that, while you put up the screws on Russia in all ways, and then you say, oh, look at them, what they are. Ukrainians are very proud people in terms of military. Look at them. The men have stayed back, the women have stayed back to fight. Look at their soldiers. They have smart, good looking fighters. And even the women are no less. They are equal fighters and they are willing to shed their blood for their homeland. Just like we had seen the film, Mel Gibson's film, Braveheart. And it was all a question of freedom. 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 The biggest watchword of democracy. Freedom. That's what we value in a democracy. Because human dignity, freedom, rule of law, fairness, judgment, courts, everything which is related to human dignity and freedom is the hallmark of a democracy. We cannot undermine this principle, and America knows this more than anybody. And that's what Ukraine wants, freedom, because they feel they're European and they're not from the Russian bloc. This is why Ukrainians want their freedom. That's the major point here. Now, where does India stand in the Ukraine-Russia crisis? See, India has traditionally been a friend, a great friend of Russia, primarily because the Russians wanted a foothold in a kind of a democracy in Asia, and they stood by for our arms and everything. Russia was one country which gave us arms, gave us dignity, gave us protection. Even in 1971 war, when Pakistan had attacked India, Americans sent their fleet with aircraft carrier to attack India in support of Pakistan. But the Russians sent their nuclear submarines and armaments and everything and said, dare not touch India. That's how deep our friendship goes. It is a bit sad that Ukraine never supported India on its political issues. They didn't support us on Article 370, Kashmir, anything. They were always in some kind of fanatic bloc. I don't know what was the reason. I don't have full information. But Russia stood by us. And that's one reason why politically India stands with Russia. I don't blame India, because you have to be with your friends. You can't backstab and, forget about your friends, whatever the consequences may be. So the final tally on Ukraine that I want to make as a closing statement here is that Europe and America must tell Russia very clearly in written form that Ukraine will never ever join NATO, number one. Number two, Ukraine must give away the 2 territories of Donbass and one more, and tell Russia in writing that yes, you can take it away, nothing to do with us. Crimea belongs to Russia. And Ukraine can be an independent nation, still being governed by Zelensky, and that, with no revenge or nothing of that sort, and just carry on with his life. That's all Putin wanted. But misguiding by NATO and America led to this. So never mind, if we can still do it, I think it's worth it. And any escalation any further, and if Russia weakens, let me tell you, China gets emboldened. Already China is raising the bar on the borders in collusion with Pakistan to teach India a lesson. They've already begun their exercise, because in case Russia was to come to us as a pact, and China was always worried that Russia can come to India's help in case of a problem. And now that Russia is weak economically and militarily, a lot of their armaments are gone. China, like a parasite, is immediately looking at India as taking an advantage. And India is already a little bit weak in terms of its air force. Against 42 squadrons of air force, we have only 30. China knows each and every detail of ours. So that's a fearful point over here. So I hope the Ukraine crisis gets over very soon. all said and done, we have to accept that European Union and even USA have taken a lot of steps, including sanctions, financial aid for Ukraine, provision of mild arms to help Ukraine. Now, Europe and America are only in a fix because if they enter the war in a larger manner by providing the troops, Russia can have the option of going nuclear. I mean, I don't know what course of history would Putin take, but he is probably uh, too furious at the moment, and he could exercise the nuclear option. If that happens, there'll be devastation in Europe and even America, and lead to an additional third world war, as we say, where even China could enter the fray and India could not be left out. So that fear is there, and that's why the Europeans and Americans cannot just boldly come and say, okay, we're doing this or that. So it is a very cautious approach to the situation. And the, as India is rightly saying, diplomacy is the only solution where you sit and talk and say, all right, what's happened has happened. You can have your way and just close the lid, because the alternative is difficult. And to say that we would decimate Russia and defeat them even in the nuclear war, yes, that could be possible right now. But Russia too will fire around 6,000 nuclear weapons that they have, with devastation which is untold in the history of the earth. That would be as good as the meteorite that fell on earth and caused the upheaval at one point of time. So I think that for the US, I mean, we must appreciate. I mean, US is making efforts and trying to do a good balancing act, and we can only hope that diplomacy works. Viewers, for all what I've said just now, I feel bad because while India is appropriate in its foreign policy because Russia is a friend and stood by us, while Ukraine always stood against us, but never mind. Still, on human angle, we need to support Ukraine to the extent of human situation, democracy, freedom, whatever. And you know, we had 20,000 students studying there happily. I think President Zelensky must immediately, unconditionally agree to what I said, and let Russia immediately withdraw and say, okay, now that you agreed, we're withdrawing and it's over. And not to get entangled into the NATO plan or American plan, which is not leading anywhere. Thank you. Bye bye.